The fire spread quickly. Wood stacks crackled loudly. Plastic covers melted. Smoke filled the cold night air. I grabbed a hose and called emergency services. By the time firefighters arrived, most of the supplies were already destroyed. They worked quickly to contain the fire. But the damage was done. Months of preparation gone in one night. The next morning, investigators inspected the scene. They noticed something unusual. The fire hadn't started naturally. It had been deliberately ignited. And several neighbors had seen something interesting earlier that night. A car leaving the area. A car that matched Karen's SUV. The HOA reaction when the story spread through the neighborhood. The HOA tried to stay quiet. Karen denied everything, but the tension was obvious. Residents whispered about the situation. Some people suspected what had happened. Others worried about what might come next, because they were beginning to realize something. The land behind my house wasn't just property. It controlled the water supply that served their entire neighborhood. The water system, the fresh water well on my property, fed a pumping station. That station connected to underground pipes running toward the neighborhood. Years earlier, the developer had signed a legal agreement with my family. The neighborhood could use the water system, but the infrastructure itself remained privately owned, which meant something very important. Control of the water belonged to me. The decision. For days I thought about what happened. My winter supplies were gone. The fire had caused thousands of dollars in damage, and someone clearly wanted to intimidate me. But I wasn't going to start shouting matches or pointless arguments. Instead, I reviewed the legal agreement tied to the water system and discovered something interesting. The contract allowed me to temporarily suspend water access for maintenance and safety inspections. The maintenance notice the following week. I sent an official notice to the HOA. It informed them that the water system required an immediate inspection and temporary shutdown. The notice followed every legal requirement. The date, the reason, the timeline, everything documented perfectly. Most residents ignored it, but Karen didn't. The shutdown. On the scheduled morning, I walked to the pump station behind my house. The sky was clear. The air was freezing. I turned the control valve slowly. And just like that, the flow of water toward the neighborhood stopped. The neighborhood panicked. Within hours, residents noticed something strange. Faucets sputtered. Showers stopped running. Toilets wouldn't refill. The entire neighborhood suddenly had no water. Phones started ringing at the HOA office. People demanded answers. Karen rushed to the pump station immediately. Karen's confrontation. Karen stormed toward me as I stood near the equipment shed. "You shut off the water," she shouted. I nodded calmly. "The system is undergoing maintenance. You can't do that," she yelled. I pulled out the legal agreement. "Yes, I can." Karen's expression changed the moment she read the document. The realization the contract was clear. Water access depended on the system being properly maintained. And since the system was privately owned, the owner controlled its operation. Karen suddenly understood something she had ignored for months. The person she'd been harassing controlled the one resource the neighborhood needed most. The HOA emergency meeting that evening. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. Residents were furious. No water meant no normal life. No cooking, no cleaning, no showers. And the solution was painfully simple. They needed to resolve the conflict with me. The apology. The next day, the HOA board arrived at my property. But this time, Karen wasn't shouting. Her voice was quiet. The board apologized for the harassment. They promised no more interference, no more complaints about my property. And most importantly, they promised cooperation. Water returns. Once the inspection was completed, I restarted the system. Water began flowing through the pipes again. Residents cheered when their faucets started working. The neighborhood returned to normal, but the relationship between the HOA and my property had changed permanently. Karen's silence. Karen stopped visiting my land. The complaint letters stopped arriving. The HOA stopped trying to control things outside their authority because they had finally learned something important. Control goes both ways. What would you do if an HOA caused damage to your property? Would you fight them legally, ignore them, or find a completely legal way to remind them where the real control lies? Comment below and tell me what you would do. And don't forget to write your city and country in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, like the video and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories, and I'll see you in the next one. The documents. I handed him the property records. Survey maps clearly showing the road running across my land. The officer studied the documents carefully. Then he looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, this road is private property." The silence. Karen's face turned pale, because suddenly the reality hit her. The HOA had been threatening the one person who kept their road usable. Without that help, they were completely stuck. The agreement. Later that day, the HOA contacted me again, but this time their tone was very different. No demands, no threats, just a simple request. Would I please reopen the gate and resume plowing the road? The lesson learned. Eventually we reached a new agreement. The HOA stopped sending complaints. They stopped interfering with the road maintenance. And the snowplow returned to its early morning schedule. The gate stayed open, the road stayed clear, and Karen, she never complained about the snowplow noise again. What would you do if an HOA tried to control your private road? Would you ignore them, take legal action, or teach them a lesson like this? Comment below and tell me what you would do. And don't forget to write your city and country in the comments. If you enjoy stories like this, like the video and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories. And I'll see you in the next one. The final straw. One morning, another letter arrived. This one threatened legal action. The HOA demanded I stop plowing the road entirely. They claimed the noise violated neighborhood standards. That was the moment I realized something. They had forgotten one very important detail. It wasn't their road. It was mine. The next snowstorm, a few days later, a massive snowstorm rolled through the mountains. Wind howled through the trees. Snow piled up quickly. By midnight, the entire road was buried. Normally, that's when I'd start the plow. But this time, I didn't. Instead, I did something much simpler. I installed a heavy steel gate at the entrance of the road, right where it connected to the highway. The morning after the next morning, the storm cleared. Bright sunlight reflected off a thick blanket of snow. The neighborhood residents began their usual routine, starting their cars, heading toward work, school buses preparing to leave. But when the first SUV reached the road entrance, it stopped, because the gate was closed, and the road behind it was completely buried in snow. The panic. Within minutes, more cars arrived. Residents realized something was wrong. The entire road was impassable, and the gate was locked. Phones came out immediately. Karen's phone started ringing nonstop. Karen arrives. Karen's SUV finally appeared near the gate. She stepped out into knee-deep snow, her face already furious. "What is going on?" she shouted. I calmly walked over from my truck. "You asked me to stop plowing the road," I said. "So I did." The realization. Karen looked down the snow-covered road, then at the locked gate, then back at me. "You can't trap the neighborhood like this," she yelled. I shrugged. "This is a private road, and according to your letters, you didn't want me maintaining it." The angry crowd. More residents gathered around. Some were frustrated. Others were confused. A few quietly realized what had happened. Without the plow, the road was useless. And since the road was private property, the gate was perfectly legal. Karen's last attempt. Karen pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police," she shouted. I nodded. "That's fine," because the truth was very simple. The road belonged to me, and property owners are allowed to close their private roads. The police arrival. About 40 minutes later, a patrol car arrived. The officer stepped out and looked at the snow-covered road, then at the locked gate. Karen rushed forward, explaining everything. But when the officer asked one question, the entire situation changed. "Who owns the road?" HOA demanded I stop plowing my private road, so I gated it and trapped them inside the mountain road. The road wasn't fancy. No asphalt, no painted lines. Just a long gravel path winding through tall pine trees and rocky hills. But it had one very important purpose. It was the only road connecting a luxury mountain neighborhood to the main highway, and that road ran directly across my property. My family owned the land long before the neighborhood ever existed, back when the area was just forest and farmland. When developers eventually built the neighborhood, they made a simple agreement. Residents could use the road, but it was still private property, and maintaining it was my responsibility. Winter in the mountains. Winters in that area were brutal. Heavy snowstorms could dump 2 feet of snow overnight. If the road wasn't plowed quickly, nobody could leave the neighborhood. Cars would slide. Delivery trucks would get stuck. Emergency vehicles couldn't pass. So every winter morning before sunrise, I started the same routine. I climbed into my old snowplow truck, started the engine, and slowly cleared the entire road. It took hours, but it kept everyone safe. The neighborhood HOA, the people living in the neighborhood, enjoyed the convenience, clean road, safe travel, easy access to the highway. But the HOA board had a reputation. They loved rules, loved control, and especially loved complaining. Karen was the president of that HOA. She believed the neighborhood deserved perfection, perfect lawns, perfect fences, perfect silence. Karen's complained. One winter morning while I was plowing the road, Karen's SUV suddenly blocked my truck. She stepped out angrily. "Do you have any idea how loud that machine is?" she snapped. I looked at the snow-covered road behind me. Without the plow, the entire road would be buried. "It's clearing the snow," I replied calmly. Karen crossed her arms. "The residents are complaining about the noise." The absurd demand. Karen handed me a printed letter, an official HOA notice. It demanded that I stop plowing the road early in the morning because it disturbed residents. I stared at the paper for a moment, then asked a simple question. "If I stop plowing, how exactly do your residents plan to leave the neighborhood?" Karen shrugged. "That's not our concern." The warning. Over the next few weeks, the HOA continued sending notices. More complaints, more warnings, more demands about noise and community disturbance. Karen insisted the plow should only run after 10 a.m., but snowstorms didn't follow HOA schedules. By 10 a.m., the road could be buried under several feet of snow, which meant cars would already be stuck. Still, Karen kept pushing.